The mysterious visitor. It was a quiet evening in the mountains. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the trees. John had just finished his dinner, and the evening air was crisp. He sat on the porch of his small cabin, sipping tea, enjoying the peaceful silence that surrounded him. The only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the occasional bird call. Life in the mountains had always been calm for him, far away from the noise of the city. He liked it that way, but tonight, something felt different. John had been sitting for about an hour when he heard a soft rustling sound behind him. At first, he thought it was just the wind. The trees were swaying and the branches creaked in the breeze. But then the sound came again, closer this time. It was not the wind, nor an animal. This was something else. He stood up and looked round, his heart beating a little faster. The rustling seemed to be coming from the woods just beyond his porch. He slowly walked over to the edge of the porch, peering into the darkness between the trees. The fading light made it hard to see anything clearly, but he felt like someone or something was out there. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows. John froze. It was a woman. At first, he thought she was just a lost hiker, but as she stepped into the light, he saw that she was unlike anyone he had ever seen before. Her skin was pale blue, almost glowing in the dim light. She had long platinum blonde hair that fell in waves around her shoulders. Her eyes were wide and full of fear, and her clothes were strange dark, weathered, and unlike anything he had ever seen on Earth. She looked terrified, as if she was running from something or someone. John took a cautious step forward. "Are you okay?" he called out, his voice gentle. He didn't want to scare her, but he needed to know who she was. The woman flinched, stepping back quickly. "Please," she said in a trembling voice, "don't hurt me." John's heart skipped a beat. He didn't know what to think. "I won't hurt you," he said softly, trying to reassure her. "You're safe here. What's your name? Where did you come from?" The woman looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and confusion. I don't know," she whispered. I just ran. They're after me." John was confused. "Who's after you?" She shook her head quickly, her eyes darting nervously around. "I don't know, but they're coming. I had to leave. Please, you have to help me." John didn't know what to say. He had never seen anyone like her before. She didn't look like any person he had ever met. Her features were sharp, but delicate, almost otherworldly. She looked like a person, but something about her was so strange, so unfamiliar. "I don't want any trouble," he said slowly. "You can stay here tonight, but you need to tell me more. What happened?" The woman hesitated for a long moment before speaking again. "I'm not from here," she said quietly. "I'm not human." John's mind raced. What was she saying? Not human. He thought about the stories he had heard in his youth, stories of strange creatures and beings from other worlds. He had always dismissed them as just that, stories. But now, standing in front of him, was a woman who seemed to be from a world he couldn't understand. "You single quotes, not human?" John asked, his voice barely a whisper. "What are you, then?" The woman swallowed hard, her eyes filled with a deep sadness. "I'm an alien. I was sent here. I had to escape. My people, they want me back. They think I've betrayed them." John stared at her in shock. An alien? This was impossible. But the more he looked at her, the more he realized she wasn't lying. There was something different about her, something that didn't belong to this world. "Don't worry," John said, trying to make sense of the situation. You can stay here. I'll keep you safe. But you have to tell me everything. How did you get here? Why are you so afraid? The woman nodded, but she didn't speak. She just stepped closer to the porch, her gaze never leaving John. She seemed unsure, like she didn't fully trust him. But for some reason, she also seemed to trust him enough to stay. John took a deep breath, trying to process what was happening. A real alien right here, standing in front of him. This was more than he had ever bargained for, but he couldn't just turn her away. There was something about her that made him want to help. Come inside, he said, stepping aside to let her in. You can stay the night. We'll figure this out together. The woman glanced at him one last time before stepping inside. She was still trembling, her eyes darting nervously as if expecting someone to burst through the door at any moment. John closed the door behind her, trying to shut out the fear that had suddenly filled the cabin. As he watched her, he couldn't help but wonder, what kind of trouble had she brought with her, and what did it mean for his quiet life in the mountains? For the first time, John felt the weight of something much larger than himself closing in. An alien inhabiting the cabin was warm, a stark contrast to the cold, dark forest outside. John lit a fire in the small stove, the flames dancing and crackling, casting a soft glow around the room. The woman sat at the table, her eyes constantly darting to the windows, as though expecting someone to come crashing through the door at any moment. Her skin, still pale blue, seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. John couldn't stop staring at her. She looked so fragile, so out of place in his humble cabin. But there was also something fierce about her, a quiet strength that lay beneath her fear. He couldn't understand how she had ended up here, in the middle of nowhere, running for her life, and yet he knew one thing for sure. She wasn't lying. Are you hungry? John asked, trying to break the silence. He wasn't sure what kind of food she might eat, but it was worth offering. She looked tired, her face drawn with worry. The woman hesitated before shaking her head. I can't eat what you eat, she whispered. I can't eat your food. John frowned. Then what do you eat? He asked, his curiosity growing. What do you need to survive? I need something different, she said slowly, glancing nervously at the door. Something my body can process. I don't know how to explain it. I'm not like you. I'm not from this world. John nodded, though he was still confused. How was he supposed to help someone who didn't even eat human food? I don't know what you need, but we'll figure it out, he said quietly. The woman looked at him with wide, uncertain eyes. You don't think I'm crazy? She asked softly. You don't think I'm just a madwoman? John shook his head. No, I believe you. I don't know what's going on, but I don't think you're crazy. A small, sad smile crossed her lips. Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You don't know how much that means to me. I've never felt more alone in my life. John felt a pang of sympathy for her. He didn't know what it was like to be hunted, to be afraid of your own people. But he could see the fear in her eyes, and he knew that she had suffered. It made him want to protect her, even though he didn't fully understand the danger she was in. You're safe here, John said, his voice firm. No one's going to hurt you. The woman's eyes flickered with doubt. You don't understand, she said, her voice shaking. They'll come for me. They'll find me. And if they do, they'll destroy everything. They'll destroy you, too. John's heart raced as the weight of her words sank in. Who are they? And why are they after you? The woman took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. I'm from a place far away. My people, ... We are different from humans. We came to Earth long ago, but we kept ourselves hidden. Some of us, though, wanted to make contact with your kind. We thought, ... We thought it could help us understand. But I was wrong. She paused, her eyes haunted by memories. I was part of a group that wanted to bring our technology to Earth. We thought we could share it, help humanity, but something went wrong. Some of my people turned against us, and they began to see humans as a threat. They want to destroy everything. We've worked for... John was silent for a long moment, trying to make sense of what she was saying. So, you ran, you escaped. The woman nodded. Yes, but it wasn't easy. My people... They don't forgive easily. They will do whatever it takes to find me, and when they do, they will destroy everything in their path. John stared at her, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. This wasn't just some strange encounter. This was real. She was an alien, and she was running for her life. And somehow, it seemed like the danger wasn't just for her, it was for everyone. You're not safe here forever, John said quietly, his voice full of uncertainty. They'll find you. The woman's face fell. I know, she whispered, but I don't have anywhere else to go. I have no one. Please, I need your help. John looked at her, a sense of responsibility weighing heavily on his shoulders. He didn't know how to fight an alien invasion. He didn't even know where to start. But he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't turn his back on her. You'll be safe here for now, John said, his voice more confident than he felt. I'll do whatever I can to help you. She looked at him with wide eyes filled with both relief and fear. Thank you, she whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. You don't know what this means to me. John nodded, but his mind was racing. The danger she spoke of was real. He didn't know how to protect her, how to fight an enemy he couldn't even see, but he had made a promise, and he would do everything he could to keep it. For now, all he could do was wait and watch. The danger was coming, and there was no way to know when it would arrive. But one thing was certain: his life, and the life of this alien woman, would never be the same again. The fear within the fire crackled softly in the cabin as the woman sat near it, still tense. Her eyes were wide, constantly scanning the room, the windows, and the door, as though waiting for something or someone to appear. John sat across from her, trying to make sense of the strange story she had shared. But the more he thought about it, the more questions he had. Her name was Lira, but even that felt unreal. She was from a distant planet, a being unlike anything he had ever imagined. Her people, her technology, everything about her world seemed so distant and strange, yet she was here, in his cabin, hiding from her own kind. Are you okay? John asked, his voice breaking the heavy silence. He had noticed her shaking earlier, but now she seemed almost frozen in place, her eyes wide, her body stiff. I'm fine, Lira replied, but her voice trembled. It's just ... I can't shake the feeling that they're still out there, watching, waiting. John frowned, feeling the weight of her fear. Who's out there? Who's after you? Lira looked at him, her eyes filled with an emotion he couldn't quite read. Was it fear, sadness, or something else? My people, she whispered. They are powerful. They have the ability to track us wherever we go. The longer I stay in one place, the closer they'll get. John's stomach tightened at the thought. So ... what should we do? How long can you stay here? Lyra's gaze dropped to the floor, her shoulders slumping. I don't know. I've never been on the run like this before. I've always been safe with my people, hidden. But now, everything is different. I don't even know who I can trust anymore. John's mind raced as he tried to think of a solution. What if we leave? Go somewhere far away, maybe somewhere they can't find us. Lyra shook her head quickly. It won't work. They'll find me no matter where I go. They'll search every corner of this planet if they have to. The only way to escape is to leave Earth entirely. John didn't know what to say. Leave Earth. It felt impossible. How could anyone just leave Earth without a plan? It was hard. Enough for him to imagine leaving his cabin, let alone this world. He had no idea how to help her. Is there any way we can stop them? He asked, the question feeling heavier than ever. Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with a deep sadness. There's nothing we can do to stop them, not by ourselves. They are too powerful, too many. John stood up, pacing across the cabin. This was bigger than he had ever imagined. An alien race, with technology beyond human understanding, hunting her down, ... And yet, he couldn't just turn her away. She had trusted him, and he couldn't let her face whatever was coming alone. He stopped by the window and looked out into the night. The forest was still and quiet, but the tension in the air felt thick. The wind had picked up, and the trees swayed, as if something was coming. Something he couldn't see. His eyes narrowed. The fear Lyra had was starting to seep into him as well. I can't just let you go out there, he said finally, his voice firm. I don't know what's out there, but I won't let you face it alone. We'll figure something out. We have to. Lyra was silent for a moment, her face softening as she looked at him. You don't understand, she whispered. They'll stop at nothing to find me. If they know you've helped me, they'll come for you too. And then ... no one will be safe. John felt a knot tighten in his chest. He had never been in a situation like this before. He was just a regular guy, living alone in the mountains. He wasn't prepared for this kind of danger, but something in him refused to let go. He had made a promise to her, and he wasn't about to break it. Don't care, he said, his voice steady. I won't let them hurt you, and I won't let them hurt me either. We'll figure this out together. Lyra looked at him for a long time, her eyes searching his face as if trying to understand his determination. Then, slowly, she nodded. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know how to repay you for your kindness. You don't even know what you're getting into. I don't care about that right now, John replied. I care about keeping you safe. We'll think of something. Just as the words left his mouth, a sudden noise from outside broke the tension in the room. It was faint, but it was there. A sound in the trees, distant but unmistakable. Something or someone was out there. Lyra's body went rigid again, her eyes wide with fear. They're here, she breathed. They found me. John rushed to the door, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew this moment had been coming, but now it was real. The danger wasn't just a story anymore, it was right outside. Lyra stood beside him, her breath quick and shallow. What do we do? She asked, her voice trembling. John didn't have an answer, but he knew one thing for sure: they had no choice but to face it together. Unveiling the truth, the noise outside grew louder, sending a chill through John's body. It wasn't just the wind anymore. There were footsteps, heavy and deliberate, crunching the dry leaves on the ground. Lyra's face turned pale, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the table. John could feel his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't sure what to do. This wasn't a normal situation. There was no manual for how to handle alien threats, no way to know what they were up against. "We have to hide," John whispered, his voice barely audible. He looked around the cabin, searching for a place that might offer them some cover. "They can't find us here." Lyra shook her head quickly, her eyes wide with panic. "No, hiding won't work. They'll find us no matter where we go. We have to do something. Now." John was about to ask her what they could do when a sharp, high-pitched sound filled the air. It was like a humming noise, steady and constant, coming from the woods. Lyra stiffened, her eyes darting to the window. "They're using the tracker," she said, her voice low. "It's a device that can detect our presence. We can't outrun it. We can't escape." John felt a wave of frustration wash over him. What could he do? He wasn't equipped to deal with something like this. He didn't have weapons. He didn't have a plan. He had nothing. "We have to leave," Lyra said suddenly, her voice filled with urgency. "We can't stay here. It's only a matter of time before they break through the barrier and find us. You don't understand. They catch me. They won't just take me. They'll take you too. They'll destroy everything." John looked at her, his mind spinning. He could see the fear in her eyes. She wasn't just afraid of being caught. She was terrified of what would happen if they were discovered. Her people didn't seem like the kind who would let anything stand in their way. "What do you mean, destroy everything?" John asked, his voice shaking. "What are they really after?" Lyra looked at him for a long moment, her eyes filled with sadness and regret. Then, slowly, she spoke. "They want to take over Earth," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My people, ... They've been planning this for years. They thought that by coming here, by blending in, they could use your world's resources to rebuild theirs, but they underestimated the human spirit. They don't see you as equals. They see you as tools, things to be controlled. And if I'm caught, they'll use me to finish what they started." John stood still, unable to comprehend what she was saying. "You're saying your people want to take over Earth. But why? And why are they after you?" Lyra's eyes closed as she sighed deeply. "I was part of a small group that didn't agree with their plans. We wanted to help, to find a peaceful way to coexist. But my people, they saw us as traitors. And when I tried to stop them, they turned against me. Now, they believe I've betrayed them, and they'll stop at nothing to find me." John's mind raced, trying to process everything. Earth, his home, the place he had spent his whole life, was under threat, and he was caught in the middle of it. Lyra wasn't just an alien. She was a key part of something much bigger, something that could change everything. "Is there a way to stop them?" John asked, his voice desperate. Lyra shook her head. "I don't know if they're coming for me. They're already too far into their plans. The best we can do now is escape, get as far away from here as possible. But they'll keep looking. I don't know how long we'll have." John's heart sank. "So what do we do now? We can't just run forever." Lyra stood up, her face determined despite the fear still in her eyes. "We have to make a choice. Either we stay and fight, or we leave and hide. But if we stay, we'll be fighting against something we can't defeat. If we leave, we'll always be looking over our shoulders. There's no way to know what's coming, John. No way to know if we'll survive." John didn't know what to say. The weight of her words pressed down on him. There was no easy answer. No way to know which option was right. But as he looked at Lira, he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't just turn his back on her. She was scared, alone, and lost in a world she didn't understand. And somehow, against all odds, he had become her only hope. "We won't run," John said finally, his voice filled with a new determination. "We'll fight. We'll do whatever it takes to stop them." Lyra's eyes widened with surprise. "You really mean that? You'd risk your life for me?" John nodded. "I don't know what we're up against, but I'm not going to let you face it alone." For the first time since she had arrived, Lira smiled just a little. It was small, but it was enough to show that, for a moment, her fear had lessened. Maybe there was hope after all. "We have to prepare," she said, her voice steadier now. "If we're going to fight, we need to be ready. They'll be here soon." John's heart raced as he realized that the fight of his life was about to begin. They didn't have much time, but together, maybe they stood a chance. The threat approaches. The wind howled outside, pushing against the walls of the cabin like an unseen force. The trees outside creaked and moaned, as if warning of something coming. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Lira stood by the window, her eyes darting nervously as she watched the darkness beyond. John sat at the table, trying to keep calm, though his mind raced with questions and fear. They were out of time. "We don't have much longer," Lira said quietly, her voice trembling with anxiety. "They're close. I can feel them." John stood up and walked over to her. He could see the fear in her eyes, and it made his own heart race. She wasn't just scared of being caught. She was terrified of what would happen if they did. The alien race that was after her people, were ruthless. He could see it now. Lira wasn't just an alien on the run. She was a target, and that target was now on his back, too. "How much time do we have?" John asked, his voice tight with urgency. Lira shook her head, her eyes still locked on the dark trees outside. "I don't know. They move quickly. Once they get a signal from the tracker, they won't stop until they find me. Or you." John clenched his fists, frustration bubbling up. There had to be something he could do, but he was just a regular guy. He wasn't prepared for a fight, not a real one. This wasn't something he had ever trained for, and yet the reality of the situation was inescapable. If he didn't act, if he didn't protect her, they would both be in danger. The thought of Lira getting caught, of her people using her to take control of Earth, made his blood boil. "We can't just sit here," John said, pacing the room. "There has to be something we can do. I can't just wait for them to show up." Lira turned to him, her face filled with concern. "You don't understand. If we try to fight them, they'll destroy us. They are much stronger than anything you've ever faced. Their technology is beyond anything Earth has, and they will use it to get what they want." John stopped pacing and looked at her. "Then we have to stop them before they get to us. We need to figure out what they want and stop it. I don't care how powerful they are. We can't just let them take over." Lyra's face softened, and for a moment, her fears seemed to lessen. "You really are determined, aren't you?" she said, a small, sad smile forming on her lips. "But it's not just about stopping them. It's about surviving. It's about staying one step ahead." John felt the weight of her words, but he didn't back down. He had to do something. He couldn't just hide and hope they would go away. "We need to get to higher ground," John said suddenly, a thought forming in his mind. "If they're tracking us, we need to take away any advantage they might have." Lyra looked at him, confused. Higher ground. You mean the mountains? John nodded. Yes. If we go up the mountain, we can get a better view of the area. We'll have time to prepare before they get too close, and we'll be harder to find. Lyra didn't seem convinced, but they have scanners. They can see through the trees, through the rocks. It won't help. John's heart sank, but then an idea flashed in his mind. He had spent enough time in the mountains to know some of the hidden paths, the places where people could go to stay out of sight. The thick forest and the rocky terrain could work to their advantage. We'll move quietly, he said, a sense of determination growing in him. We'll use the old trail. I know a way up the mountain that's off the beaten path. It's hard to track, even with technology. Lyra seemed to think for a moment, then nodded. All right, but we need to move fast. John gathered a few things they might need: a flashlight, some food, and a first aid kit. As he packed, he looked over at Lyra. Her eyes were focused, but there was still a shadow of fear in them. He knew she was scared, but she wasn't showing it. She was a fighter, and for the first time since they had met, John felt like maybe, just maybe, they could survive this. Lyra stood up, her body stiff with tension. We leave now, before they get any closer, she said, her voice calm but firm. Once we leave, there's no turning back. We have to keep moving. If we stop for even a moment, they'll find us. John nodded. He didn't need any more convincing. They were already running out of time. He couldn't think of anything else, couldn't think of any way out other than to keep moving forward. They had no plan, no clear direction, but they had each other, and that was something. Together, they left the cabin, stepping into the cold night air. The forest was dark, the trees casting long shadows on the ground. The path ahead was uncertain, but John could feel the weight of their footsteps as they moved further into the woods. The sound of their footsteps was the only thing that broke the silence. The only thing he could hear, besides the wind rustling through the leaves and the occasional crack of a branch underfoot. The threat was closing in, but they had a small lead, a small window of time before the hunters would catch up. Lyra walked beside him, her eyes scanning the surroundings, but she didn't speak. They didn't need words anymore. They both knew what was at stake. The mountain loomed ahead, and with it, the unknown. Escape or fight. The air grew colder as John and Lyra moved deeper into the forest, their footsteps quiet but steady. The trees were dense, their trunks thick and ancient, casting dark shadows that seemed to swallow them whole. The only sound was the crunch of dry leaves underfoot and the occasional snap of a twig. The wind howled through the branches above, carrying a chill that made John's breath visible in the night air. As they climbed higher up the mountain, the path became more rugged. Loose rocks and uneven ground made the journey harder, but they pressed on. Lyra walked with a kind of quiet grace, her eyes always scanning the surroundings. John could feel her unease, even though she didn't say much. He knew she was just as scared as he was. They couldn't stop. Not even for a second. We need to keep moving, Lyra said, her voice low and urgent. If we stop, they'll find us. We can't afford to rest. John didn't argue. He knew she was right. Every minute they spent standing still gave the enemy more time to catch up. The silence between them stretched on, thick with the tension of the unknown. But John kept his eyes focused ahead, trying to ignore the growing anxiety in his chest. The further they climbed, the harder it became to breathe. The thin mountain air burned his lungs, but he pushed on, determined to get as high as possible. They needed to find shelter, a place to regroup. But he knew there was no guarantee they would make it. "We're close," John said, looking at Lira. "There's a cave just up ahead. It's small, but it'll keep us hidden for a while." Lira nodded without a word, her pace quickening. John's heart beat faster as they neared the cave. They had to make it there. It was their only hope of staying one step ahead of the danger that was chasing them. But just as they neared the entrance, Lira stopped suddenly, her body stiffening. John turned to look at her, his heart skipping a beat. "Something's wrong," Lira whispered, her voice filled with fear. John's eyes scanned the surroundings, but he saw nothing. The forest was still, too still. The usual sounds of the night, the chirping of insects, the rustling of leaves had stopped. It was as if the whole world had gone silent. "We're being watched," Lira said, her voice barely audible. John's blood ran cold. He knew she was right. Something was out there, something watching them. The feeling of being hunted, of being stalked, pressed down on him like a weight. "They've found us," Lira whispered, her voice tight with fear. "We're not alone anymore." John's heart pounded in his chest as he looked around frantically. They couldn't stay here. The cave was too exposed. They needed to move, to find a safer place. But he knew it was too late. The enemy was closing in, and there was nowhere to hide. Suddenly, the air around them seemed to shift, the wind picking up speed. John could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He turned to Lira, his eyes wide with fear. "We need to fight," John said, his voice shaky but determined. "We can't run anymore." Lira shook her head. "We can't fight them, John. You don't understand, they're not just hunters. They have technology, weapons. They'll destroy us before we even get the chance to fight back." John's mind raced. He had no idea how to fight an alien army, but he wasn't going to let them take Lira without a fight. He couldn't. She had trusted him, and now it was his turn to protect her. "We have to try," John said, his voice firm. "There's no other choice. We can't just run forever." Lira hesitated, her face filled with doubt. But then, slowly, she nodded. "All right," she said softly. "We'll fight, but we need to make it count. We need to use the environment to our advantage." John looked around. The mountainside was rugged, the trees thick and dense. There were rocks and boulders scattered around, places to hide and take cover. They could use the terrain, the darkness, to their advantage. "Let's set a trap," John said, his mind already working. "We can use the trees, the rocks. We can create obstacles for them." Lira nodded, her expression hardening with resolve. "We'll need to work quickly. If we're going to have any chance, we need to act now." Together, they moved quickly, gathering what little they could from the surroundings. John found a few large rocks and dragged them into position, while Lira used her alien abilities to manipulate the environment in ways John could barely understand. She moved with precision, her body almost glowing in the moonlight as she worked. The trap was simple but effective. They would use the rocks to create a barrier, forcing the enemy into a narrow path where they could ambush them. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. As they finished setting up, John's heart raced with anticipation. He had no idea what to expect, no idea how this would play out. But there was no turning back now. They had done everything they could to prepare. The enemy was close, and it wouldn't be long before they arrived. John turned to Lira, his face grim. "We can do this," he said, his voice low and determined. "We have to." Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and hope. "Let's make it count," she said, her voice steady. They took their positions, crouching low behind the rocks, waiting for the moment when the enemy would appear. The night air was heavy with tension. Every rustle of leaves, every crack of a branch made their hearts skip a beat. Then, suddenly, the first figure appeared, moving quickly through the trees. The enemy had arrived. A new beginning. The air was thick with tension as John and Lyra waited, crouched behind the rocks, their eyes scanning the trees. Every crack of a branch, every gust of wind sent their hearts into overdrive. They had set their trap, but now they were at the mercy of the unknown. They had no idea how many enemies were coming, or if their plan would even work. John's pulse thundered in his ears. He couldn't afford to let his nerves get the best of him. Lyra was counting on him. She had trusted him, and now it was his turn to protect her. For what seemed like an eternity, there was nothing, no sound, no movement. Then, out of the corner of his eye, John saw it. A shadow flitted through the trees, moving quickly and silently, like a predator stalking its prey. His heart raced as he saw the first of their enemies approach, just as they had planned. The figure was tall, humanoid, but its movements were unnervingly precise and swift. John's grip tightened around the makeshift weapon. He had fashioned a sturdy branch with a sharp rock tied to the end. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. He looked at Lyra, who was poised beside him. Her eyes narrowed in concentration. She didn't need weapons. Her abilities were her weapons. John wasn't sure what she could do, but he knew she was capable of things that defied all logic. The enemy moved closer, unaware of the trap ahead. John held his breath, waiting for the right moment. Suddenly, Lyra tensed beside him. Without warning, she leaped into action. Her body moved with unnatural speed, and in a flash, she was in the middle of the path the enemy was walking. The figure froze, its eyes locking onto hers. But before it could react, Lyra raised her hand, and the air around her shimmered. A powerful blast of energy shot from her palm, knocking the enemy backward. The figure stumbled, disoriented, but it quickly regained its balance, its eyes flashing with fury. It raised a strange glowing weapon, pointing it directly at Lyra. "Now," John shouted. With one swift movement, John jumped from behind the rocks and lunged at the enemy, using the weapon he had fashioned to knock the weapon out of its hands. The force of the blow sent the enemy sprawling, and before it could recover, John and Lyra were on top of it, working together to subdue it. The struggle lasted only a few moments, but it felt like an eternity. Finally, with a final push, they knocked the enemy to the ground. Panting and exhausted, they stood over the fallen figure, watching as it struggled to get up, its breath coming in short, ragged gasps. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the enemy raised its hands in surrender. "Enough," it said, its voice cold and emotionless. "You've won, for now." Lyra looked down at it, her face hard. "This isn't over," she said. "You can't just come to our world and take it for your own." The enemy's eyes glowed with an eerie light. "You don't understand. We have no choice. We're dying. Our planet is dying. We need this world." John stepped forward, his voice firm. "That's no excuse. You can't take Earth. You can't force people to live under your control." The enemy's eyes flickered with something, perhaps regret, perhaps anger, but it said nothing more. Instead, it slowly backed away, its body glowing faintly as it retreated into the darkness of the trees. John and Lyra stood in silence, their hearts still racing from the confrontation. The danger had passed, but it didn't feel like a victory. The enemy might have been driven back, but the threat was still out there. "We can't stop now," Lyra said softly, her voice filled with determination. "There are more of them. They won't give up." John nodded. "We'll fight. We'll keep fighting. We won't let them take our world." Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything. I don't know what I would have done without you." John smiled, though it was a tired, weary smile. "You don't have to thank me. We're in this together. We'll figure it out. Whatever it takes." The night was still, and for the first time in what felt like forever, John felt a flicker of hope. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. But together, they could face whatever came next. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for a future, for a world they both wanted to protect. As the dawn began to break, casting a soft light over the mountain, John and Lyra stood side by side, looking out over the vast, empty forest. The journey ahead would be long and dangerous, but they knew one thing for sure: they would face it together, and maybe, just maybe, they could make a difference.